So good afternoon. Thank you so very much for sharing with us today as we take just a little bit of time to engage a bit more around where we are with transportation. Here today I have with me representatives from each of our partners, our contractors that are providing services for us with transportation. My name is Ironetta Wright, Superintendent, Cincinnati Public Schools, and I've been very vocal, very upfront and very honest about where we are with transportation up to this time. The truth is, our students deserve quality transportation service, the best service that we can possibly provide. From the beginning of the school year, this has been a challenge for the district. Collectively, we have had improvements. Right now, we are about at an 80% on-time rate for transportation, and that is not where we want to be, nor is it where we know our families and our students deserve for us to be. There have been a variety of reasons that have gotten us to this place. One of them we've identified, of course, as the national shortage of bus drivers. Nationally, there is a shortage of bus drivers, but that's only one of the areas. There are several different scenarios that have caused some challenges in Cincinnati public schools. One, we provide transportation as a school district. We provide transportation not only to our students that are enrolled to Cincinnati public schools, but we do provide transportation to all of our students that are enrolled, or all students in the city that are enrolled in our private, our charter, and our parochial schools, and that is a requirement by the state. The state's requirement is that we only provide transportation services for students in grades K through 8. As a district, we provide services for all of our students K through 12. Our high school students up until last year were on Metro, our 7th through 12th grade students, because high school in our district starts at 7th grade. And our elementary students are on our yellow bus service. The state made the determination last year that students that were in private, charter, or parochial schools, specifically in our charter schools, if they were K through 8th grade, they could not ride public transportation. So our board felt that if that was important for students that were in our charter schools not to ride public transportation, then students that were enrolled in Cincinnati public schools deserved the same. So they made the decision at that time to add our 7th and 8th grade students to our yellow buses and our yellow bus service. Simultaneously, there was a change in how we are actually routing students to school. So the state's requirement for service is if students live 2 miles or more away from their school, from the front door of the school to the front door of their home, they are provided transportation services, bus services. Until last year, our district's bus service was 1.25 miles, so we provide more than the state expects. The state expects at least 2 miles. As a district, we did 1.25 miles, so a mile and a quarter. This year, we changed that to 1 mile. So the state requires 2 miles. We were covering 1.25 miles, and this year, we changed that to 1 mile to provide that level of service for families. And we understand the desire for the service for families, but coupled with adding the 7th and 8th grade students back to the buses, decreasing the mileage from home to the school really helped to exacerbate the challenge. I think the third that has been really a challenge for us is in an effort to provide more of an optimized route and routing process. Last year, the district went through a review of routes, used a service that was going to optimize routes. Our families, up until that time, had been accustomed to what many in the transportation world would call almost a curb-to-curb service, where you could sit in your living room, on your couch, and look out the window, and pretty much there is your bus. For those of us that have had to ride buses for a period of time, and I date myself, I'm one of those. But when I rode the bus, I had to walk around the corner to go to the bus stop. My friend walked from down the street, and another friend walked from up the other street. So in order to optimize those routes, that's pretty much what the organization did. They made recommendations for how we could maximize the routes, which also meant that students were walking a little further than they had been accustomed to walking before. Our requirement by the state for distance from the house to a bus stop is half a mile, so 0.5 miles. That is not the service that our families have been accustomed to. But that is what was provided as a part of the optimization study. The second challenge with the study, however, was the study in many instances did not take into consideration the Cincinnati context. So we think about Cincinnati, we think about roads that we know that are major thoroughfares, roads that might require a three-point turn, roads that might be a dead end. Those would be things that we know by being in Cincinnati and being a part of Cincinnati. This company was not a part of that, and there was not the review of each of those routes prior to. So therefore, it caused some challenges once the school year started. I think the last that has been an area that we really will look to focus on as we move forward is we also route every child that is eligible for transportation to a bus, whether they ride the bus or not. So what happens as a part of that is we know that there are several students that won't actually take the bus service or the bus transportation, but they're routed to the bus. So therefore, the team spends days and continues, and it's continuing to happen now, updating the students that are riding the bus, updating the routes for the students that are riding the bus, and it's an ongoing process. So our families are getting updates every time a new child is added to a bus, there may be an update. Every time a family moves, there may be an update. So it does require that more service is needed than often that's provided, but it does cause parents to get a lot of information. So when we think about all of those different bullet points, connected to the fact that we also have a national driver shortage, therein lies some of our challenge. In coming in on May 2nd, I think most know that I started on May 2nd and started to review where we were with transportation. We recognized that there were going to be some struggles with transportation, but those really did not manifest themselves until about mid-July, where we saw about mid-July that we have some concern around buses, some concern around transportation. But the team continued to work, continued to route students, continued to work with our private, charter, and parochial schools to try to get the students assigned to transportation and to buses. The week that school started, that Monday, August the 16th, the team came to me, and I must share that my chief of operations started the week before. The transportation director started July the 8th, I believe was the date. And so everyone was fairly new transitioning into those roles. Many of the other staff members had been here for the entire time. But at that point, we recognized that we had a severe shortage of actual buses. So students had been assigned to routes. That meant if you looked in the system, as parents were looking in the system for the route that their child had, students were assigned to routes, but there was not a bus identified for that route. And at that moment, and it was August 16th, I don't think I'll forget it, we needed 40 additional buses in a time where we have a national driver shortage. So we reached out to our partners. We're contracted with our partners. They tell us in terms of those contracts how many buses they can provide, what they can offer to us. They did that in the spring. So they told us, based on our capacity, based on our capability, this is what we can provide for you. At least 2 of those contractors were able to get additional buses and drivers for us, but it has been a challenge because that means some of the resources that they had in place that would help to cover driver absenteeism or would help to cover when a driver leaves, they've lost those resources because they wanted to help us get our students to school, and we needed 40 additional buses at that time. Right now, we are still in need of about 20. So throughout the process, since the beginning of August, we've moved our on-time performance from about 35% to right around 80%. We do have stacked routes. That was a part of the optimization plan that was done from last year. What a stacked route means is essentially someone is going to be late. Stacked route says that one bus picks up the first group, takes that group to school, drops them off, goes back to get another group and takes that group back to school. So essentially, you have a group that is going to be late getting to school and a group that's going to be late being picked up from school. Currently, we don't have other options. Everything that we could do, everything that we can do in terms of those things, we've done at this point. We reached out to Metro to add additional 7th and 8th grade students to Metro back in August when we realized that we did have additional concerns for the 7th and 8th grade students. However, the number of 7th and 8th grade students that have transitioned to Metro at this point has not been enough to truly alleviate the concerns that we have with the 7th and 8th grade population. So it continues to be a work in progress. The reality is, as we also look at the information, and I don't want to make light of this at all, any child not being picked up is a problem. Any child not being picked up on time is a problem. Any child getting home late is a problem. So I don't want to minimize that. But I do need to share that we've had a consistent challenge with late arrivals, late pickups, missed buses at about 5 or 6 schools in our district out of 65. And I share that because those are the schools, those are the parents, those are the students that we're going to hear from the most because they're not getting the service that we know they deserve. And we understand that. I'm a parent first. And as a parent, that concerns me as well. So we want to make sure that as we go through our processes, we are clear on the expectations and we're clear on how we communicate and how we follow up. I think lastly, and then I'm going to open it up for each of the contractors to share just a little bit about their organization, and then we'll open up for questions. I think lastly, the area that's also truly important to us and that we do want to share is we believe the more information that we can provide, the more input that we can get, the more we make sure that this is not just a CPS issue, but it is a community concern and a community problem, it becomes a community conversation. So we've had conversations around transportation. We started those in August. We give pretty consistent updates about where we are with transportation, but honestly, we try to do that when we have new information to share. And unfortunately, we have not had a lot of new information to share. Now we're in a process where January and February we are opening up for additional town hall conversations around transportation because we have some decisions that we need to make going into next school year. And as we're making those recommendations to the board for action, we want to do that with the input from the community. Across our district, we have different start times across schools. We have a open policy for 7th through 12th grade where we offer open enrollment across our schools 7th through 12th grade. So what that means is any student from any neighborhood can apply to go to any school in our district and they receive transportation. So it is not an exaggeration when we say that on a daily basis we have buses that are going into almost every neighborhood in our school district. We also have different start times. So there, as you think about, for those of us that have worked through transportation, have worked with transportation before, generally you're working on some kind of a system where you're able to stagger the times, the opening times, the start times of schools, so that you can then use buses to cover one group of schools, and then that bus has a period of time that they get those students to school before it's time for them to pick up the other students. We don't have that kind of luxury right now in our district, and it's across the district. So we really have to look at our start times so that we're able to look at what kind of staggering we're able to do with that. And I think the last is looking at the possibility of a hub system, where just much like we do in a metro, where you're picked up from a neighborhood, you go to one location, and then from that location, the bus then takes you to a variety of schools based on where you're going at that point. I think what I want to share is there's no one easy solution, and as a result of that, it's going to take all of us to work through the concerns that we have. We are willing to be partners. We're willing to think through where we are, but very honestly speaking, this is not a quick fix. And it is not something that I can say between now and the end of this school year it's going to be rectified. it is going to take all of us to get involved, to get engaged, to give feedback so that we can give our parents the best that we possibly can. So at this point, we have each of our four contractors that we work with that are here with us. We have a representative from Metro, representative from First Student, a representative from UTS, and a representative from Peterman. And those are the four contractors that we work with. So we will start right to my right, and we'll just continue to go around. If you just want to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your organization, and then we're going to open up for questions.
Share this one? All right. Thank you. Be happy to. John Ravazio here on behalf of Metro, and first and foremost, thank you for inviting us, all of us here, in this opportunity to talk about the truths and the challenges that you just laid out so well at Metro. Like everybody here, I'm sure, our primary focus is safe, on-time, reliable transportation. For us, that includes our partnership with CPS for the students, but then also the Metro customers throughout the region. Happy to say here that we have a long history of a very successful partnership with CPS, and that continues. While this year's agreement for transportation, like Superintendent Wright laid out, includes transportation for 9th through 12th graders, we were very happy to step in and assist with the 7th and 8th grade challenge and request that you mentioned. To date, we've provided roughly 10,500 student passes to the district for the students. That's an increase of 4,000 over what was expected to be the original arrangement just for the 9th through 12th graders. 80% of those passes have been utilized to date so far, so very good utilization for the passes requested, and we're seeing an average daily CPS ridership of about 8,500 trips aboard the Metro system. As no doubt you'll hear repeated today, and Superintendent hit on it, we do have many challenges, one of them continuing to be the pandemic-induced labor challenge. We need more bus drivers, all of us do, right? In response to this, we've worked closely with CPS to analyze our routes on a regular basis, assessing them monthly, and then even adjusting them quarterly in terms of their schedule, their frequency, and so on. Part of that assessment has to include on-time performance. I'm very glad to hear you mention that today. We're very proud to report, as we do to the district on a regular basis, we've achieved an 88% on-time rate for trips scheduled to arrive at least 10 minutes before first bell, and a 97% on-time rate for trips scheduled to arrive 5 minutes before first bell. And again, we're very glad to share that data with CPS. It aids our continuing collaboration in seeking areas for improvement. We've also been happy to hear Superintendent throughout the school year, and several board members, they've expressed that same satisfaction with the response from Metro. That's feedback that we're very glad to hear. But we know there's always room for improvement in this area. I'm very proud of the work done by the team at the district and Metro as well that makes all these transportation solutions happen. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, to hear that input, to collaborate with this team here. Looking forward to the discussion and certainly future discussions on the matter as well.
And I think one thing I'll add as we get prepared to hear from First Student is when I transitioned into the district in May, it was after a very vocal time and challenges that had occurred between CPS and Metro, because Metro had removed the extra routes. So there was a lot of consternation around what this school year was going to look like in working with Metro. And I will share, just as John shared, that we have not seen those challenges at this point. We have seen an improvement in our on-time performance. All of our students have arrived to school safely. We've not had a concern in terms of Metro of there not being buses that are showing up and being at the routes. So that's not a concern that we've had this year. But I do know that there were concerns last year from the change in the routing system. So that may come up as a question, but I did want to make sure that I address that as we get ready to go to our next. And so next we have First Student, and I will acknowledge that First Student is our contractor right now that has been able to provide the most buses to us. When we talked about the 40 buses that we needed, they had already provided what they told us they could do in the contract. but they consistently work with us to provide additional buses to us. That's a plus and a minus. The plus is they are giving us additional buses. The minus is there's a hit to on-time performance because they are utilizing all of their resources to get our students to school and to get them to school safely and to get them home safely, which means generally buses are running several routes from several schools in order for that to happen. So now we'll go to first student.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joe Eversole. I'm the area general manager for First Student. And Cincinnati is our hometown here at First Student. Our corporate offices are downtown. And we've been grateful to serve CPS now for more than a decade. A little bit about our company, if you don't know who we are. We're the largest school bus transportation company in North America. And we service about 5 million students a day at our locations across the U.S. and Canada. In Cincinnati, we're currently running 188 routes. As Superintendent mentioned, we've gone above the 175 that we originally contracted for, and we've committed to continue to hire and recruit. So my recruiting team would advise me that we are still hiring. If you're interested in the community and want to learn to drive a school bus, please visit our website, and we would happily engage you in training. I would also add that, again, want to thank the superintendent for inviting us to be part of this discussion today, not just with you guys, but with our peers here. We're all in this together, and we really, I think, have tried to pull all of our resources together to help each other. And really, the goal, our mission is that every trip is that every student, for a student, is to provide unmatched care and the safest ride to school. And safety is a core value for us, so it's really critical that we're able to be part of the solution and continue to work together and collaborate.
I think next we have Peterman. Peterman is next for us. And so Peterman started with us as one of our contractors that really started the school year maximizing the work that they were already doing with us. And so they have continued to do that, and we do appreciate that. They have been able to maintain their drivers. Even if there have been shortages, they've been able to replace those drivers. And so we appreciate that as well. So we wanted to acknowledge that publicly.
Excuse me, thank you. Again, thanks for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to share this information. Peterman Bus has been around since 1921. My boss's great-grandfather had a special needs child that required some schooling. There was no place to have a school, so they ended up having the school created. It was created in Old General Hospital. It eventually became Condon School, which became part of the Cincinnati Public School District. When they realized that there was no transportation to get the children to and from, his great-grandfather went out, or his grandfather went out and got some buses, and that's how they started with transportation. And they're still here today. Mr. Settle is still overseeing the business, although in 2014 it was purchased by National Express, which is a large school bus operator as First Student with 22,000 buses throughout the United States and Canada. One of the things that Joe touched on it briefly, is recruiting and hiring and retention. Those are major focuses for all of the vendors. It's something we never stop doing. All of us offer some kind of a hiring bonus, a retention bonus, reasons to stay with us and stay with the district. We take great pride in all of our drivers. For every vendor, I can certainly speak for that, take great pride in what they do. They want to deliver the students safely and on time every day. Many of them, their children still ride the buses, or their grandchildren ride the buses, or they've been driving so long that they remember the kids, and some of them become adults and now they're driving a bus. So it's something that we take very seriously. We truly want to partner with everyone. In the beginning of the year, as Superintendent kindly pointed out, we were in a position that for at least the first few weeks of August, or the first few weeks of school start in August, we were able to help cover some routes until the schools that we had starting in September began. So we were very grateful to have that opportunity to help. We continue to look for more ways to get more vehicles and fleet in here and more drivers so that we can help get the district through this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last is UTS. And second to First Student, UTS was our last provider that has been able to provide and continues to provide some additional routes for us and some additional route coverage. And they've also been able to do some substitution route coverage for us. So when we do find a bus, for whatever reason that route is not being run, we have been able to utilize them, to call on them so that they're able to help us get our children home safely. So UTS.
Thank you for that, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Tom Nicholas, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations for UTS. A locally family-owned operated company here in Cincinnati for 40 years. We serve the Central Ohio and Southwest Ohio areas in 12 school districts. We have 150 yellow buses today and over 100 minivan or transit vans as well. 5 years ago, we were afforded the opportunity to earn a strategic partnership relationship with Cincinnati Public for van service. And then 3 years ago, we started into Yellow Bus. So very happy to be a vendor and a partner as well. Yeah, there are challenges each year, and this year is no different. We work tirelessly and hard every day to recruit and retain and find drivers, but moreover retain the current drivers and work with the other vendors. We started 3 years ago with Yellow Bus with 30 buses, and today we've had the opportunity with CPS help. We have 100 buses today, and we are operating 95 Yellow Bus routes and 22 transit van routes. So the challenge is to keep that going. What we're really proud of the idea of when we started 3 years ago, we're basically, this isn't going to work. This is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a failure. You're not going to be able to find the drivers or the buses or so on. And what we're proud of is we had that opportunity for those 30 routes that have now become over 90 routes. In addition, really proud of those teammates that come to work each day and do the very best they can as a professional to take care of the students to get to and from school. In addition, very proud to be part of the vendor team that works with CPS leadership. We don't really look at each other as a vendor or a competitor. We're a CPS provider. So it's not First Student, Peterman, or UTS, it's CPS. And I think we're the front and back porch of the communities in many ways. Let's get the students to and from school, listen to what's going on, and try to find a sustainable or a quick solution that can become sustainable in the long run. So it is a difficult scenario to recruit and find enough drivers at times, but working at capacity and using all of our resources together, I think we will find that solution. So thank you for having me and allowing us to be a part of this today.
Thank you. And so just a few things that I just want to address in terms of closing before we open up. So there are still things for us to work on. For CPS, administratively, we do have to work on our responsiveness to families when they're making contact, especially with our call center. We expect that if parents are reaching out to us, that we are responding to them within a 24 to 48-hour period. So that's the first. The second thing that we expect is that we're giving accurate information to families. They deserve to get accurate information, and they deserve that information to be timely. The third is we have put many protocols in place to make sure that we are cross-referencing the work that we're doing with families. Just a few weeks ago, we found that a set of those protocols were not followed, which involved about 200 students being removed from buses that should not have been removed from buses. So how did we find that out? Parents started emailing. And when we did the research, we determined that our protocol had not been followed. So we followed up with that administratively, but that is something that we own because that is something that should not have happened. We did have a protocol in place so that that did not happen, and it happened anyway. So parents deserve better than that. The other thing that we have worked with each of the contractors on, from the beginning of the year, we noticed that many of the buses were getting in so quickly. They were approved. They have to be approved to travel in Ohio, so they have to be approved by the Department of Transportation in order for them to meet Ohio standards. It is the expectation that our buses have GPSs on them. And so in some instances, the buses were approved for Ohio, but we were still working to cross-reference the GPSs on those buses with our actual routes. We worked that out with our contractors, and notices were being provided to families. So we knew notices were being provided to families. So if students were being picked up late, they were getting a notice, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and at least it let families know that there is a problem. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've noticed an influx of families that have not been provided that notice. So we have given that feedback to our contractors. They are working with the bus drivers because that's where the notice comes from. The notice goes from the bus driver to the call center. In some of those instances, we found that those that are in the call center are not there to push out those notices because they're driving buses. And so that's one of the areas that we don't necessarily think about or talk about, but it is something that we need to address as well, because all of our providers truly have really been giving us an all hands on deck approach. It's not okay for families. Families are not comfortable with that, but it's the reality of some of the things that we work with. So we continue to work with our contractors so that we are getting those notices out. There is an app that families can also utilize that gives them information on the buses as well. We use Versatrans, and that app is through Versatrans, and the sign up is done through that app. So there were some questions about the app earlier on. The information for how to download the app is still on our website so that families are able to access that information there as well.
Yeah, sorry. As far as the driver shortage portion, we definitely have seen that nationally. There is definitely a shortage, and I would say that it varies from area to area. I'll use Indianapolis as one of my locations. I have 12 across Ohio and one in Indianapolis. Indianapolis is similar in size, and we have had similar challenges there. Actually, here we're fully staffed currently at First Student. But in order to accomplish that, we did a lot of things over the summer. We took our starting rate up for our drivers. We increased pay for other drivers. We have a union, so it's all part of the wage scale, but we increased wages. We also took the daily guarantee hours from 6 to 7 because a lot of the feedback we were getting from candidates was, the cost of things are going up in a post-COVID world with inflation being what it is and things of that nature. So what I would say it is unique about Cincinnati, though, you're covering 90 square miles. It's very complex when you have students crossing all these boundaries. So it can be very challenging with all the things that the superintendent talked about and the routing and the charter schools and the bell times being different. And now you introduce House Bill 110 and all these other, potential challenges, logistical challenges that they have to work through. It's very complex, and again, it's very large in size and scope.
Joe also referenced the start times, House Bill 110. I think it's also relevant that I shared that we provide transportation to all of our charter schools, our non-publics, our parochial schools. We also do not have any control over their start time. So we cannot give them any information about what time they start. We cannot give any additional information about their calendar, but we are expected to comply and make sure the students get back and forth to school, which adds an added barrier. Thank you for the question. So it varies. The 80% is across the board. I shared earlier that we have about 5 or 6 schools where it's been pretty consistent, and those are the schools where we have the routes that are stacked, the stacked routes. We have worked with schools, we've worked with principals, we started out the year in that space to make sure that they were working with families and working with students so that they had opportunities to recover the learning from any time that they missed. So schools have done everything from reorganize their bell times and what classes were in the morning. They have given additional or extended time for students during the school day. They've done additional lunch bunch work, and so principals and teachers have really recognized that it's out of the students' control. At the end of the quarter, we also did a survey with the schools to look at, okay, you had some students that were not academically successful. Was this because of what they were working with transportation? Because that's some of what we heard. And unanimously it was no, because the opportunities had been provided to the students. Now, the truth is, we cannot get back that actual time that they were in class. So we have to use additional opportunities to get that information and that learning to them. can't share the names of the schools now off the top of my head. It would be hard. We'll give you the list because I don't want to give you the wrong. They're not, and that's the one thing. So the question is whether or not they were concentrated, and they're not. And so it's not in one particular area because again, and most of them. I know SCPA is one of them, but I don't want to give out the other four because I don't want to give the wrong names. But they are not in the same area of town. SCPA services up through 12th grade, so it's a wider population. And that's where we've seen some pretty huge challenge. So our board did make the decision to go to healthy start times for the students. And so that changed about 6 of our schools to an earlier start time. They moved from a 9:15 start to an 8:45 start. When that was done, however, those same 7th and 8th grade students were on the Metro. And so because they were on Metro, we knew that there would be buses that would run at a time that would get the students to school at 8:45. So it was compounded with the earlier start time that's now then added to the additional schools that were already early start times, and now the students are on yellow buses. So I think I'm going to open this up to partners. I'll respond to that question last, but I really would like for our contractors to talk more about the process for updating routes and then the orientation that's given to bus drivers so that they do know the routes that the students are on. We'll start with UTS.
I was going to say, I turned. Again, Tom Nicholas, UTS. So the question is wrong stops. Is that correct? What we find during the beginning of the school is you are giving a route sheet for that particular school or area, and that driver will do what we call a dry run or a practice to make sure that the turns and stops are safe. Once you get actively transporting the students, you can then see how they related to the actual person boarding or unloading. And if there is an issue with crossing a not busy street or a busier street, then we communicate with a Cincinnati Public School specialist to say we might want to look at this stop. Sometimes you're only looking at on a GPS level map, or we'll send a road supervisor or a manager, or even myself, and go and let's look and see what's happening there. And when that occurs, and CPS has been great, the specialists, they speak with our dispatchers or our routers, and we try to find, is this collaborative to the point that the parent or guardian or other understands where to go, and does it meet the expectation or exceed it for that matter? And typically that occurs. Doing every single stop is going to take a while, but usually we hear from a parent or a school or the specialist on the route performance, and then we adjust or communicate that adjustment for something sustainable after that.
Generally, we are a Council of Great City Schools member school district, and so we usually go along with that metrics, which really takes into consideration all of the largest urban school districts in the country. And so usually that number is greater than 95. So anywhere between 95 and 98% is usually about average. And when we look at the data for last school year for on-time performance, it was right around 97%. I think that would be for our bus providers as well.
I'll continue to answer. The answer is if it's a kindergartner or other, you need a sibling or a parent and or a guardian assigned to that stop. So if that has occurred, that becomes a service disruption that we have to communicate to CPS to adjust. If it's somebody older than that, then they can get off at that stop freely.
Not for Metro, right? We don't provide transportation to those ages. But on the service design element and the stops, we work a little differently because we're using our regular service, right? The published schedules that are built for any rider in the region. But we don't do that in a vacuum, right? We share those plans with CPS. We know we've got to get thousands of students to school on time. So that routing, those plans, those schedulings, those drop-off times, making sure that as we're planning the routes, there's a very good dialogue with the district as well. So maybe similar to the routing of the yellow bus providers, but also a little different.
I think across the board, we have really tried this school year to operate with a lot of grace, to be honest, because we know that our contractors are in many instances, they have offered us the opportunity to over-deliver. And so when you think about where we started last year, if we were only asking them to do those things that they were doing for us last year, then I don't know that we would see some of the concerns that we see now. However, we do address the concerns. We have open conversation and contact with each of the contractors. And in many of we have contracts with them, so there are expectations within those contracts. And so there are reminders that we've had to send out for that, and in terms of the follow-up. So we have had some issues where when it was determined by the contractor, or determined by us and the contractor, that the bus driver was wrong, there's been discipline for the bus driver, which has included even, and I can't speak to which contractor right now, but which has included even drivers being removed from routes altogether. And so we do have follow-up, we do have constant contact with them, but it is important that we're really trying to operate with as much grace as possible. And sometimes that's not always very popular because everyone wants the issue resolved immediately. And we understand why. And as I've often shared, for one that believes in operating in excellence, this has been one of the most challenging times for me because it is not something that I am able to immediately fix. My responsibility is to figure out the problem, come up with the plan, implement the plan, and fix the problem. And this is not one that I can fix that way. So it's been truly problematic. So if the students are not there, we do have to mark that they're not there. We are starting a process where we connect that to transportation for them not being there, but we cannot say that students are in school or they're on time in school if they're actually not, even if it is a bus issue. So I think to answer your question, I think that he answered the question that came up to start with. We have bus stops. Each of the drivers have route sheets. When those routes are updated, that's communicated with the driver, it's communicated with the bus contractor, and it's updated for the families through our student information system so that parents have immediate access to it as well. So the driver is the one that is responsible for stopping at the bus stop. So have there been some questions around bus stops that have been missing? There have been. And when we go back and do some of the research, what we see in some of the instances, while it sounds like there's been a lot, it really hasn't. It's been some of the same in terms of some of the challenges of having backup drivers, having drivers that are out, that are learning routes, that are learning all of the spaces, and making sure that they get that information. So, or a new driver that just started and they wanted to get in and did not necessarily have the lead time to run the entire route before driving the bus. So that's how we would best respond to that. So as I shared, we provide transportation right now for students that live a mile or more away from school. For our students that are in our non-pubs, our charters, our private or parochial schools, if they prefer to use their own transportation instead of riding the bus, they can be paid for that. So they can be paid out for that for the year. We also, and I heard UTS reference this, but we also have worked with our contractors, and many of them have also provided vans for us. And so that's another alternate route, because generally you don't see for a regular school route a van coming instead of a school bus. Now, we need to continue to do better communication with families about that. All of the vans are marked. They're marked with the name of the bus company so that we're clear that that is an actual official vehicle. But because it's not something that's been as popular, it is not something that families are as familiar with. We've also looked at a couple of other rideshare programs that have been offering services in other areas. That's taken a little longer to get up and running, but that is one of the opportunities as well. Right, so we do have a call center. And very transparently, the call center is not manned by CPS employees. And so one of the areas moving forward that we see as a service delivery model upgrade is we need to improve the quality of service that's provided through the call center. Inadvertently, a family may call because they have a bus issue, for example. But the reality is it's really not a bus issue. It's a coding issue because the address wasn't right in the system to start with. And so therefore it's then routed to someone else who would be the one to work with that because the call center cannot respond to those questions. So I would still ask and direct them to contact the call center when they believe that it is a bus-related issue. We have a new call center manager that started in the last couple of weeks, so we're really excited about that so that we can really start to better monitor those data metrics. But I would still encourage them to call the call center. And I think my email address has been put everywhere, out on every site. And so parents email me directly. They email my chief operations officer directly. And so we would encourage them to continue doing that. I think the only challenge with that is, you know, a lot of times it's midnight before I'm reading emails. And so if it's truly urgent, we want to make sure that we are contacting the call center or contacting the office directly so that we can try to get a response to that. I don't know that answer yet because I think that that's going to be the importance of getting feedback from families. We have offered that opportunity to 7th and 8th grade families already. And so any 7th and 8th grade family in the district, if they would like to ride the Metro, we have given them passes to do that. That was the initial passes were for the first semester. And so today we open that process up again for the second semester because our goal is to have families, all families will be notified. Our goal is to have the families respond by December 2nd so that then gives us time to work with Metro to really try to get bus passes for the students before they leave for winter break. So that's why the time period is as it is. Right now, I don't know if that would be the resolve because the number of families that have transitioned to Metro just hasn't been enough to truly address the 7th and 8th grade concern. We have asked families to make a choice in terms of Metro versus Yellow Bus because it is very difficult for us to keep up with that process. Families, however, do have what's called deviated stops. So that means if they get bus transportation, but on Monday or Tuesday they ride the bus, on Wednesday or Thursday they go to the neighborhood daycare, on Friday they go to grandma's house. We honor each one of those requests if the students get deviated stops, which also causes a challenge. But we really do not have a way to monitor the comparison or the transition between both. Now, can families or can students still, if they're doing activities, we still provide Metro passes for our 7th and 8th grade students for activities. So families can still get those passes, you know, for activities and those kinds of things. And if they choose to ride the Metro, they can still do that, but that means in the system they would show that they're a yellow bus driver.
I did, and that's the issue there where we come in. That kind of partnership is, you know, the student, the family has requested it, CPS lets us know, and then we generate the pass itself. The service network's already built, right? So where, you know, Yellow Bus might have to build a routing or deviate to get the student because now the routes changed a little bit. For us, it's just more a matter of education that, okay, now this 7th and 8th grader is riding, so whether that's CPS reaching out to the family, even members of our own planning and scheduling department, talk to the family directly, help them with trip planning, whether it's using the app or websites and so on, these kind of resources. So we're ready. We've continued that partnership throughout the semester, and I'm glad to hear it's continuing, ready to help.
I could speak for First Student. I mean, specific to Cincinnati, we are fully staffed at the moment. We brought in additional buses from our Indianapolis location, and they have to be spec to Ohio, so there's a process that we go through. They're inspected by the State Highway Patrol. So we brought in additional resources. But one thing I would note is that because of supply chain issues, and they can speak for themselves, but I think you will hear just nationally that there are issues, particularly with Type A buses, which are the shorter buses. And it kind of ties into your earlier question about what is maybe different about CPS. We run 72 passenger buses, or Type C is your regular standard school bus that most people would identify. Some of them have wheelchair lifts, some of them don't. You have the shorter buses. You have some of those with wheelchair lifts and some that don't. And currently there is a national shortage of the chassis to make those buses. So for example, the buses that we have ordered for this year haven't arrived yet. Our 12 new buses are scheduled to get here in February. I would have hoped to had those back in June or July of last year. So there is an issue with a fleet. We were fortunate that we were able to bring in buses from other places. You guys may have a different answer to that.
No, you filled in everything.
I think the one thing that I will add there as well is there has been some interest from our board around having our own small fleet of buses as well, which doesn't just include the buses. It includes everything that goes along with having the buses. But to Joe's point, just talking to one of those bus manufacturers last week, the lead time on that, we continue to ask, but the lead time on that is really 18 to 24 months. So it's not something that gives us a resolve right now, and it makes it more challenging because it's not a fix for us even immediately going into next school year. I think the one other thing that I would add is there was the question earlier about whether or not, some of this is just in Cincinnati. We know of a couple of areas close to us, one of the school districts that had to close school for a couple of days at least because they did not have bus transportation. And we know of another one of our sister school districts that's going through a complete overhaul of their buses starting in January. And so, and the number of drivers that they had that were also short was in excess of 100 drivers, just looking at the data that was provided. So even in our area, not just with Cincinnati or Cincinnati proper, when we think around our area, it's a real issue. And the other thing is, while we meet with our team quite often, and just, I want to say 2 weeks ago, we were in a meeting with First Student, and we were talking about, the driver shortage and needing drivers. And right before then, First Student had hired 7 drivers, and they lost 7 drivers. And so just as quickly as you're bringing them in, they're leaving. So they're fully staffed right now. They were fully staffed at that moment, and we're all hopeful that nothing else happens, because if something happens, then that's one more bus that needs another driver. What we are also encouraging is anyone that is interested for any of our companies, if you are interested, we've had joint hiring fairs, we've had joint recruitment fairs. I make light of it, but I said I'm going to get my CDL, but that is not even a quick turnaround, right? And so it's really thinking about if there are individuals out there that are also interested, they're willing, they have the credentials to drive. I believe between our bus contractors, we could find them a job, but it is important that we continue to share that information.
Certainly. I know we do. I'm sure the other providers do as well. The $2,000 Metro signing bonus. Not only do we provide the CDL training, we found great success in training folks to take the written portion of the test before they even go down the road of training for the actual license itself. That's been very fruitful. So anybody that's a little nervous about getting into the space, plenty of folks at our organizations to help to steer you along the way and give you the training that you need.
Yeah, I will echo that as well. At UTS, probably similar to First Student in Peterman, we offered paid training. So you receive your hourly rate while you're getting paid to train and operate, and then we pay for the testing and so on, besides sign-on and referral bonuses.